Hi guys, it's Rebecca. Thank you so much for joining me for today's video. Today's video is going to be my November reading wrap up. I'm a little bit late in filming this video. I am filming here. I know it's kind of dark and you see my Christmas tree shadow, but I've been filming like by my bed and I'm sitting on the floor and that's kind of been bothering my back. So I'm back at the couch just because my Christmas tree is in front of the window that I filmed, so this is kind of like the best lighting that I could find for now. But anyway, regardless, this month I read all these books. They are, yeah, it's 11 and it looks like less, but I am just gonna get started and I'm going to go in, they're like in size because I put them in size to take my thumbnail. And so I'm just gonna get started from top to bottom. The first book I'm gonna talk about is An Offer from a Gentleman. This is the third book in the Bridgerton series. And so far this has been my favorite book. And it's funny because, and I'm laughing because on Goodreads, this has like a lot of hate towards Benedict. This is Benedict's character. Benedict is the second born. And but I really liked him in this story. This book kind of starts off kind of like a Cinderella story. There's a girl who's living with her stepmother and sisters. There's a ball. She goes to the ball against, you know, hiding from the family. She runs into Benedict, and then something happens and she has to run out of there before midnight. You know, very, very Cinderella-ish. I kept thinking of like the movie Ever After in my head. And maybe because I love that movie, maybe that's why I have like a special connection to this book. But yeah, it's the third book in the Bridgerton series. I found Benedict very swoony, if that's a word. And I really enjoyed it. Like I said, this is my favorite of the three that I've read so far. I did find a bunch of them on Book Outlet, even though they're the mass paperback, but it's okay, they were super cheap. So I'm excited that I can go through a few more of these later on. Maybe I can finish the series early next year because like I said, I have a bunch of the books. But yeah, really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars on Goodreads. Then I finished a series. The next book that I finished was Acceptance by Jeff Vandermeer. And this is the third and final book in the Southern Reach trilogy. I really enjoyed this book, but I feel like this is like very hardcore sci-fi. You know, you have like your soft fantasy, like YA fantasy, and then you have your high fantasy books like Brent Weeks and Brandon Sanderson. This kind of felt heavier, that like on the heavier tier of science fiction. The Southern Reach starts with book 1, which is Annihilation, which is was turned into a movie, which I didn't like. I kind of felt bored. But that talks about a group of scientists that go into Area X, which is an area where weird things are happening. People are dying in there, and if they come out of there, if they make it out alive, they're like all psychologically like all messed up, right? They don't behave well and people don't know what's happening. The second book, Authority, we follow another character in which he is trying to figure out what is happening to the people that are coming out. He's trying to find out what's going on inside Area X. And in Acceptance, we follow another scientist who is kind of trying to go back into Area X to find some answers, because up to this point we haven't been able to find any answers as to what is really happening in Area X. And so in this book we follow these people don't really have names. Like we have just they're referred to by what they do for a living. Like we have the biologist, we have the botanist, we have the scientist, we have the doctor. That's how you know the characters. They don't really have names. So this was a very interesting trilogy. It's not my favorite science fiction book that I have read, but I did enjoy it, and I'm glad that I finished another series this year. I have a ton of series that I've already owned, like the whole thing, so I've been trying to catch up on the series or finish a complete series. So I'm glad that I finally picked this one up and I was able to finish it. I enjoyed it, but if you're not into science fiction, I wouldn't recommend this. I feel like you would really need to be into science fiction to enjoy this. The next book that I finished was Sex and Vanity by Kevin Kwan. He is the author of Crazy Rich Asians, and this book also follows like an Asian American character. And I think Kevin Kwan is obsessed with like opulence and society and rich people, because in this book we follow another girl who comes from that kind of background life. It's kind of a long lost love who gets reunited in the future. We follow, what is her name, Lucy, who in her like younger years, you know, in the whole society, people kind of like know each other in those circles. She has this guy named George who she kind of hates. Life happens, they kind of go their separate ways, but as life happens, they kind of reunite again, and she starts developing feelings for him, even though she's engaged to marry somebody else up in high society. It's a fun book. It's not as good as Crazy Rich Asians. I kind of chuckled a little bit here and there, but I didn't find it as funny and as entertaining as Crazy Rich Asians. It's a very smart, short book. It's very fast, like you can read it fairly quickly, but definitely not his best. I am hoping to finish this year Crazy Rich Asians. I do have the third book that I need to read, but this one was a fun book, but not as good as Crazy Rich Asians. The next 3 books that I read is actually a series. This is the spin-off, I guess, to the Gone series by Michael Grant. You have Monster, which is book 1, Villain, which is book 2, and Hero, which is book 3. And I can't say much about this because it is a spin-off from the Gone series. The Gone series is a series about this thing that happens on Earth, and everybody age 16 and up disappears, and only everybody 15 and below are left on Earth, kind of to fend for themselves. And so this happens 4 or 5 years after the events of the Gone series. Gone is 7 books long. So this is 4 years after that. And in this series we follow kind of Earth is still being threatened by these meteors that are coming towards Earth with virus that are infecting people. And so these people that are being infected by these virus that the meteors are carrying are mutating into kind of monsters, hence the name here. But some people are using their newly developed powers for good, whereas others are using it for evil. And so we follow the gang here. Some of the characters from the Gone series make a reappearance here. We kind of see them, but we have different main characters. I really enjoyed it. Just as interesting and as fast-paced as the Gone series was, and it's a page turner. Like you get so sucked into the world right away, and there's not a dull moment. There's no like dead space, fluffy stuff to fill in like the books for page count. As you can see, the second book is significantly shorter than the other 2, and that's because Michael Grant doesn't care to add fluff in the story for the sake of making the story longer. He gives you what you need for the story, and that's it. I really enjoyed it. Highly recommend the Gone series if you haven't read it. And if you've read the Gone series and you haven't read these, go ahead and pick them up because I think they're very good. The next book that I read was A Rogue of One's Own by Evie Dunmore. This is the follow-up to, what is her name? I don't remember, but Bringing Down the Duke, which I really enjoyed. This one, I didn't really care for it, and it kind of put me in a reading slump at the beginning. I read this book at the beginning of the month. It's the first book I read, and it kind of like put me in a reading slump. It really did. This is from it's not a series, but it's kind of like a companionship of books. It's called A League of Extraordinary Women, and this kind of takes place during the suffrage era, and the female characters are very feminist characters, and the male characters are kind of like your lovable bad guys. Like they're men, and I guess the men from back then, they used to, I don't know. Point being is that I don't remember this book very much because I didn't like it very much. It was a struggle to like pay attention to what I was reading because I could not get into it. I did start it a couple of times and I honestly don't remember much about it, so that tells you how much I enjoyed it. Take it with a grain of salt. Maybe I was just like in a book hangover from last month, but yeah, this one didn't enjoy very much. A book I really enjoyed was Jonathan Unleashed by Meg Rosoff. This is a book that I've never heard anybody talk about, but it's a book about dogs. So I loved it. We follow this guy named Jonathan who is kind of pretty content with his life. He has a girlfriend who he kind of, you know, is content with. He feels like maybe she's possibly the one. Maybe he should just take the next step in the relationship. And so his brother decides to, or needs to go overseas for business, and so he leaves the two dogs so he can watch them. And he becomes kind of borderline obsessed with taking care of these dogs. He wants to make sure the dogs are well taken care of, that they're healthy. He even like takes them to the vet because he feels like the dogs are not happy. Like he almost wants to take the dogs to a dog psychologist. And in the meantime, when he starts taking care of these dogs, he realizes that maybe the girl that he has been dating for so long might not be the girl for him. He starts rethinking his priorities, what he wants in life, what he's looking for, and it's kind of a story of self-discovery. I really enjoyed this book. I thought it was really funny. There's a little bit of romance, not with the main character and his girlfriend, but another character, and I really enjoyed it. I'm surprised not enough people talk about this book. It's a great story. If you love dogs, I think you should just automatically pick it up. I really enjoyed it. The next book that I have here is The Sky is Everywhere by Jandy Nelson. And this is the second book that I've read by Jandy Nelson. And this is also the second book that I didn't like from her. The book that I read from her was The Sky is Everywhere, and I didn't really care for that book. I know it has a lot of hype and a lot of people enjoy that book, but I just didn't care for it. I just couldn't connect with any of the characters. And the same thing happened with this book. In this book, we follow a girl named Bailey whose sister dies suddenly. And then as she's going through the grief of trying to process her sister's death, she kind of starts coping. Her coping mechanisms are a little bit questionable. And she might inflict more pain on others as she's trying to heal herself. Again, like I said, I didn't connect with her or the characters. I couldn't relate with anything that she was going through. Her decisions were very poor. I think she made very dumb decisions, and some things she did, which I would have thought were pretty unforgivable, kind of were just swept under the rug, and we kind of passed them. So yeah, I didn't really care for this. I think I'm gonna give up on Jandy Nelson's books. I'm not interested in picking up any more of her stories. Then I read In 5 Years by Rebecca Serle. And this book is we follow a girl, what is her name? Danny. And we follow her story. When we get to know her at the beginning of the book, she has a kind of like a 5-year plan. She's looking to get engaged to her current boyfriend. And then one night she goes to bed, she wakes up, she's living in a completely different apartment with a completely different guy. Her life is not where she thought she would be. And then all of a sudden she goes back to sleep. When she wakes up, she's back in time, in her current timeline, with the guy that she just got engaged to. And then we follow her life, and we see how she ended up at where she ends up in 5 years, which is the vision, I guess, that she had at the beginning of the book, and we see how she got to that point. I thought this was gonna be like a funny romantic book, but it's pretty sad. This is another kind of like, it starts kind of like lighthearted and then it gets really sad towards the end, and it's like I'm depressed by the time I finished reading this book. The same thing happened with My Oxford Year. If you guys have read that book, you guys know that it starts really fun and lighthearted and you think it's gonna be a happy-go-lucky story, and then by the end you're like distraught and torn inside. That's the same thing that happens with this book. This is that chick lit, funny rom-com book. This is kind of deep. I enjoyed it, but because it was not what I was expecting, it kind of took away from my enjoyment a little bit. But if you read it, good for you, but it is something that I would like recommend and tell people to go pick up. And the last book that I read was The Wife Upstairs by Rachel Hawkins. This book, I was also kind of disappointed. A lot of books disappointed me this month. Maybe that's why I was like not into reading a lot of the stories. But this book is another one that I had heard a ton of hype from, and it just didn't live up to the hype. Maybe I noticed that when I read books that don't have enough hype, like I enjoy them more than the books that I do see hyped up. Anyway, in this book we follow Jane, who is kind of struggling to get by, and she gets a job walking dogs at this rich neighborhood. And then during her time walking these dogs, she meets Eddie, which is a rich husband, widower, and they kind of fall for each other. It happens very fast. She ends up marrying him, and she moves into the house. And as she gets to know Eddie and she's living in the house, she starts making discoveries and discovers secrets from Eddie and Eddie's past relationship with his wife. And that's all I'm gonna say, because I don't want to ruin too much of the mystery that's in this book. This is supposed to be a mystery thriller. It wasn't that mysterious. I mean, The Wife Upstairs kind of says everything. It's not a very, what's the word, subtle title, but it was fine. It was a fine book. So those are all the stories that I read in the month of November. I'm sorry that not all of them were very funny, but you know, sometimes you pick up books that you enjoy more than others. My goal for December is to finish 2 trilogies and maybe even a 3rd one if I can get my book on the 3rd book from Crazy Rich Asians. But I do have, like I said, a ton of series that are already completed, and hopefully I can get more. For 2022, I'm gonna try to tackle my series, either finish the ones that I have already finished, like that I own all the books, or get caught up with series that I've already started that are still ongoing. But yeah, that's it for now, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you on the next one. Stay tuned soonish for, well, towards the end of the year, for my top 10 books that I read, my top 10 that I read in 2021. And that's it. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.